Hello, this is Matthew, and this is an introduction to the poster stack. I don't remember what support Janice has at his website, but there's some really good things there in terms of CSS and other things. So please refer to his website for details. I just want to give you kind of a broad overview of the poster stack and what makes it so fantastic. So here I am on a page that I can't share. Well, I can share the page with you, but it's password protected, so you won't be able to access it. So this is a page made mainly with Poster. Poster is a stack. So if we look at this page, this very top part is not made with Poster. So this is kind of pre-Poster area. Then as we scroll down, there's some of these posts. There's only 3 so far because the course hasn't started yet. But that's all done with Poster. And I'll come back to that. Over here is a sidebar. And all the stuff down here is, my theme is Foundry. So people who use Foundry or Foundation or something similar, that's kind of a blank page theme. Much of this will be intuitive that I'm going to show you. For those of you who use typical themes, what I've created is a 2-column page. But with you who use typical themes, this would be your sidebar area. I've called it sidebar in this case. And what is relevant is these things, categories and month posted. Those are relevant because they deal with poster material. Okay, and so then if I look at one of these, it probably doesn't matter which I look at. Let's look at learning schedule. So there's a little image, there's the title, blah, 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 and there's a little summary introduction and then read more button. And if I click on that, I go in and there's material. Okay, in this case, there's a lot of text material, more than usual. And then there's a little table. They can, download the table as a PDF. And then there's a discuss area. You don't have to put that on every post, but there's a discuss area. Useful for me if they have questions, because I get an automatic email if they do post something. And then I can click and go back to the main homepage. And there we are. And so that's, in general, what it looks like. I can click on the image. And notice it takes me in here to this. Okay. Basically, in this class, this is not going to be relevant to many of you. I'm using images as kind of icons. So writing assignments, I'm almost always going to use this, the pencils with the yellow. Things that deal with orientation, introduction to the course, I'm using these mountains. For other kinds of things like student reflections, for projects, for challenges, I'm using other photographs as kind of icons. Okay, so there we go. Only 3 so far because the course hasn't started. So let's go over to RapidWeaver. And here is my home page. You'll notice at the top, I have the SiteLock stack, and that's made by Joe Workman. It works with SiteLock and makes things a little easier, but it's not relevant to Poster right now. But that's what's driving that part. And then if you're used to a regular theme, this will look a little unusual. And Foundry and Foundation has something similar. I have a big container I've made, and within that container, I've created 2 columns. Okay, so in a lot of pages, I don't have 2 columns, but I do on this one. So let's take a look. Then I have some stuff at the top, this 1-column thing that's hidden. I'll come back to it, the poster stack, and then specific poster items. Now, before I get into all that, I want to look at stuff on the right-hand side. Now, under CSS, I have a few CSS items. If you'll notice, the first 2 things I have say poster details. So that's kind of, the poster details is really like the permalink. So there's the front-facing summary, and then there's the permalink, and then the discuss thread. And what this CSS does is it makes the maximum width 700 pixels for both. 700 pixels for both because I want them both to have the same width, otherwise it looks a little funny. And how that works is, let's say I go into here and I go website tour. What's driving this is it becomes hard for people to read text if it's wider than about 640 to 700 pixels. Even if you have a lot more space, it's really hard if you have, in this case, physically long sentences. So when you click on this, notice I actually have a lot of white space on the left and on the right. I could have used more space, but I have constrained it to 700 pixels. And then you can see part of the stack nature of this. I've put in this button. I've embedded this Vimeo, and I have this button to go back. And if we made comments here, well, you can even see the whole discuss area is also limited to 700 pixels. But I'm limiting that to 700 just so stylistically it looks nice with the above content in terms of spacing. Okay, so let's go back. So that's that first CSS. May not be needed by you. The next two serve for me another thing. I think Janus gives you some CSS options at his website. In both these cases, I'm saying poster details and poster body, poster title to have no text decoration. Now that's because of my particular theme, which is Foundry and how I set it up. So if we go back, the way I set up Foundry is that if there is a link, underline it so it's more visible. So you can see this is a link, this is a link. So I wanted to make those more visible. But there's always an exception to the rule. So in these cases, what I wanted is this header, which is also a link, not to have an underline. And if I go back to the home page, main page, I also wanted these not to have an underline. I just thought it looked ugly. Again, you may disagree, but that's what these are doing, is it's getting rid of the underlines in both the detailed or permalink view and the overall or summary view. This CSS, a little further down, it's just so we show no tags. In my case, I didn't need tags. For the course I'm doing, there'll probably be 50 to 60 posts overall across 4 to 5 months. And, everything can be organized well enough with categories. Tags aren't needed. May change for you. Matter of fact, you might want tags and not categories, so you might want to do the reverse. And then the last one is a little specific. What Janus did in a recent update to Poster is he created this feature section. So let's go back over to the page. And what the feature section does is it takes whatever is your newest post, if you choose to implement it, it takes your newest post and makes it kind of horizontally oriented. So the image in this case is to the left and this little summary area is to the right. Whereas normally, notice, image top, summary bottom. So it's become horizontal instead of a vertical orientation with a little divider line. And it just makes it stand out. And the featured post is always the one that's on top. So I want it to have the feature thing. I think it makes it really nice. However, the way the feature item works is if I didn't do anything, the border between the right side of this image and the left side of this text are smushed up against one another. So what that CSS is doing is saying put in 36 pixels, or 36 pixels is really half an inch. Put in a half of an inch of space between these. So if I go back, that's what this is doing. It's giving me 36 or half an inch of spacing between them. You can copy and do that. Okay, so that's that part. Now let's go to the main part of all of this, and there's the main poster stack, which is really brilliant. I'm not going to go over everything. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. Okay. So let's go to the main poster. You can see it's made up of a main poster stack and then items. So the main poster stack, you can see if you look at poster basics, feed, metadata, styling, share buttons, text, tools, blah, 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 blah. I've chosen to do things like responsive video. Probably everybody should do that. There's no reason, well, I don't know. Janus gave it as an option, so there may be some reason not to do it, but I can't imagine what it is. Reveal items on scroll is really up to you. If you go up to my page, I'm going to reload this. Well, you don't really see it in this case because you see all these items, but if there are items below this, you would see them fading in as I scroll down a little bit. Is that important? Really up to you. Okay, so let's go up to poster basics. There's 3 different layouts. I think the Rapid Weaver blog option is really boring, so I didn't choose that. Masonry columns may be good for some of you, but I chose Flexbox columns and this setup. You can make more columns if you wanted to. I think it makes things too cramped for most people. So you can play around with that. Items per page, I chose 5, and I chose 5. What's important is I chose an odd number, and I chose an odd number because if I choose an even number, I always have kind of some blank space. So I wanted to make sure this is 1, 2, 3, and I wanted to now have 4, 5 before we went on to a second page. And what I'm going to do, tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some of these not drafts so you see what it looks like. Let's go beyond 5. Okay, so now if I preview this, so here we go, see, and you can see, and then see, it kind of fades in, and now it's telling me I got another page, so I can click on that, and there we go. Okay, so that's what that is doing. Let's go back to Poster General. So it doesn't matter how many you set up, but I chose 5. There's a bunch of things I chose to have a featured item, to display pagination, to display previous and next posts. I decided not to do that. Different for you. Date format you can choose, time format. Title header actually is pretty important because title header is on the summary view and title details is in the permalink view. And I want them to be different sizes. But I had to click this title header override. Metadata, archive style, blah, blah, blah. You can choose what you want. Poster feed, I filled in stuff, but I really don't use the RSS. Metadata, Facebook and Twitter, I don't use that, may be important to you. Styling, can be incredibly important, and he gives you a ton of options. Now you can see in my case, I don't use most of these options. I create a border on the bottom of each post. And what I do is I create some padding, 20 pixels of padding at the top. And all in all of this gives kind of a style I like. But you can see everything else I have chosen not to take advantage of. But again, you may feel differently. Okay, so let's do that. Share buttons, I have not done it. I implemented some things, but not really. Poster text, this is text that you have in there. My previous and next page I did with Font Awesome. That's one of the choices. But you have a lot of things in here, and obviously I speak and write in English, but for those of you who speak in another language or just want to use slang English or Scottish, whatever that is, you can put it in. And poster tools. So there's a lot of options in here. I kept it pretty simple for what I wanted, not because I couldn't stand the complexity, but I just didn't need all the options. But I appreciate them being there for different kinds of challenges. If you're starting out with Poster, I would really say make all of these things as simple as possible to get started. And where you probably want to spend most of your time is on the basics, right? That's the foundation, and playing around with that. And then you have specific poster items. So notice, let's take a look at a key thing here that's really nice. If you look at these poster items, you can see most of them are as they are, but 3 of them have these green pencils. Well, that's because over on the right where I am, I can designate it as a draft. So this top one, called About Interview Project, I'm going to go over to draft and unclick it. And see, the green pencil goes away, goes on, goes off, goes on. So this is really nice because you have a very visual indicator if something's in draft mode, which means it doesn't show up. And you also have an indicator of what it's about and what date ideally you want to publish it. So I'm going to go back and make some of these drafts because I don't want my students to see them yet. I've written them, but I just don't want them to see them yet. Okay, so I only want them to see 3 right now. The other thing that's right here is hide content in edit mode. So that's really useful. So let's go to website tour, and it's not a draft, but I have chosen to hide the content. I'll come back to that in a moment. But notice on the right, that's where I put the title, website tour. I can choose to display the title, which you're going to want to do most of the time, the date, whether you want to display it, whether you want to display the author, header content and details. We'll look at what the header, in my case, the header content is really the image. Summary content, enable discuss comments. All of that's really wonderful, especially the enable discuss comments. You can turn that on or off on a post by post basis. Okay, so let's look at the details here. So the way this is set up is I have three areas: header content, summary content, and main content. The header content in my case, I believe includes the title and any things like categories or stuff. But the only other thing I've put in here is an image, and do images the way you do them. I've chosen to drag in a markdown stack. That's the easiest for me, and I warehouse my images. So, I've put in the relevant HTML for it. But if you have a photo stack you like or an image stack you like, just drag that in and then drag in your image, whatever you prefer. The summary content in my case is, you can see it's made up of a couple stacks, markdown in this case, plus a button. Now, I'll come back to this more later. And then here's my main content. It consists of a few stacks, markdown, a video embed, this comes with Foundry, and a button to take me back to the home page. So you can use as many stacks as you want, as many different stacks as you want, whatever you enjoy. So that's that. I want to look at a couple things into the right. You can see how in my sidebar area I have categories. Well, now let's go in this. And I believe Janice gives this at the website, but to put in your categories, here it is. I just put this in, and my categories will show up in what my homemade sidebar area. And same with month. There we go. And of course, I wasn't interested in tags, so I have nothing for tags. But I was able to create a custom sidebar that has that information, plus has some image credits, plus an email form, and some other things. Okay. And then finally, let's take a look at poster stacks in general. So you can see it comes with a set of 9 stacks. Now what I'm doing for our purposes is I'm never using Poster Lite. That really serves kind of a different purpose. I'm not using Poster Image, but for some of you, that's going to be a great way to go. I'm using Poster, I'm using Poster Back, I'm using Poster Item. I am not using Poster RSS, but that's important for you. Poster Read More, I think I'm using. Poster Social, I'm not. And Show Hide is actually incredibly important. So I've used the poster, I've used the poster item. Now let's go down here. And the Poster Read More, what I've done with this button stack, or however you do buttons, notice if I click on this button stack and we go over to the link over to the right, there's nothing set. Because what this Poster Read More does is it automatically takes me to the permalinked version of that particular item. I don't have to know the specific address. It does it for me. So I can drag in here anything I want and it will make it a button. So you could drag in an image and it will make it a button, essentially, a linkable thing. And I similarly use Poster Back. It will take you back to the main page, not the detailed or permalinked view. And notice if I click on that button, there is no link there. The Poster Back automatically does that for me. Okay, so those are kind of no-brainers to put in. They work really nicely. So now let's go to the top, and there's this area called one column that I've hidden, but let's now show it. And what I've done is use the Show Hide here. And if you notice, I got 2, a Show Hide here and a Show Hide here. Now this is really brilliant. If I click on Show Hide here, sorry, I can't say that fast, and you look to the right, it says Show Only in Main with Filter. I don't know what the filter thing is. I haven't used that. And Detail. So if you take a look at this, so this is the main page, and I'm showing this on the main page, but I don't want it to show on the detailed pages. So when I go to a detail or permalinked like this, see, I don't want anything to show, that top stuff to show anymore. So what this says is just show it on the main page. And now let's look at this Show Hide. It says only show it in the detail page. Now, what do I'm asking it to show in the detail page? Well, if I click on this, it's saying set the margin at top to be 40. You could put in content, you could do anything else, but let's see why I do that. And this is specific to just how Foundry works. If I put in 0 and I go in, okay, and now I click, See, it gets butted up against the top, so I wanted some spacing. Some of you might prefer 20 pixels of spacing. I preferred 40 pixels. So I'm going to go back and put in that 40 pixels again. There we go. So then when I go to the preview and I click, there's that little extra spacing. So Janus has really nicely given you immense flexibility with this. By the way, just to say, notice how the headers I set to H3 for the summary view and H2 for the detail or permalink view. This is an H3. Notice this is actually an H1 up here. This is a little smaller. H2 would probably be too large. And if I click on this, this is H2. Notice how it's a little larger. So your theme will have H1 through H6 settings, and if you use something like Foundry or Foundation, you have a little more control in the sense of you have H1 through H6 settings, but you're able to set them very specifically what size they are. So I hope that helps. This is just really nice way to go. I love the draft. I love that I can see what's coming up. I find this just incredibly useful. There's so much flexibility because I can use any stack I have. So in some future ones, I'm going to be having audio. I already have video, tables, photo galleries, whatever you want. It's really, really nicely done. I hope as a brief introduction, this helps you get started. Start with the basics. Don't try to do too much. Build up kind of 3 sample items, see how it looks, tweak it a little bit, and you can always refine it later. But one of the really, really great tools out there now for Rapid Weaver users.